Hey everyone, welcome to this video. With all the inflation we currently have and rising energy prices, I was wondering if playing electric guitar will be a luxury hobby because it's getting too expensive. And I was talking with Martin, and in this video we want to show you how much it actually costs to run a tube amp, to run a practice amp like the Spark 40, because Professor Martin got the answer to my questions.
Well, professor is a little too much. I was just Googling a lot, and yeah, the calculation is pretty straightforward in the end. And I have a little cheat sheet over here for everything. So the first thing you have to look at is what amp are you running. A Class A tube amp, for example, always drains the maximum energy. If it's running or not running, or at least almost. If it's not running, it takes the maximum energy from the input. Class AB is not that bad, but you also need a lot of energy alone to heat the tubes. And like this, you're also losing a lot of energy in this. And then you have Class D amps or modeling amps with transistors that are way more efficient and use way less energy than your tube amps. So in our examples we have the Spark 40 here, because from that one we actually know exactly how much power it uses, how much energy it consumes. And we have a Marshall, because from Marshall I found their maximum energy usage.
In the calculation we're using a 50 watts Marshall. This is just a DSL-20 head, it's just a representation of a Marshall tube amp.
Yeah, and the Marshall tube amp is a Class AB amp, like most amps with two tubes. A Class A amp usually is a small tube amp, very simple. As a rule of thumb, I found on the gear page that you would use for a Class AB amp 2.4 to 2.8 times the energy that the amp is having on the output. Which means if you're running a 50 watt amp, you're usually at about 150 watts, something like this, a little less, a little more. What you also have to consider is that tube amp, the output power is mostly for clean. So if you're running it on overdrive, you will have a little more energy usually than your than what is stated on the data sheet. And Marshall is one of those that have their maximum energy consumption on the input in the data sheets, which is for pretty much all 50 watt amps 175 watts, which goes fairly close to this rule of thumb. It's a little over it, but that's also because you have a little more on distortion if you're cranking it all the way. As mentioned, a Class A amp on the other hand runs always on 100% of the input, so if you reduce the volume it doesn't change anything of what it consumes. Usually you're at about 25 to 30% of efficiency, which means if you're having a 100 watt input, you will have 25 or 30 watt output, or say the other way around, if you have a 25 watt amp, you have 100 watt consumption. We've also went on to factor in pedals, but what we've quickly found out is that pedals don't make much of a difference for all this.
Changing the volume on the amp changes more than having a pedal board on.
On an AB or on a Class D amp, definitely. For a reference, I've selected the Harley Benton Power Plant ISO 12 that I'm using. That has a maximum power rate of 27 watts.
Okay.
That it can deliver. And yeah, those 27 watts you will pretty much never have, because an output on that one is, I think you have 3 outputs with 500 milliamperes right off the top of my head, and the rest is 300 milliamperes output. And actually a drive pedal like the LPD 68 Deluxe uses 12 milliamperes.
Okay.
So that's a 30th of the actual output that it can deliver.
Yeah.
And you won't have everything running all the time. What consumes more power are digital pedals. So there's that for tube amps and pedals. And so yeah, when looking at pedals, we thought we'll leave them out of the calculation because yeah, you won't run this many that it makes really a difference when you're running a tube amp. And then we have the Class D amps or modulars as well, which are way more efficient. We're having the Positive Grid Spark 40 here because we made a video about him being battery powered.
Yep.
With a 20 ampere hour battery. And in this video we've also tested how long it can run on 102 dB.
I think it was 9 hours in total.
9.5 hours
9.5.
it was. And yeah, if we calculate this with the 19 volts on the battery and 20 ampere hours, we get exactly 40 watts. So it's pretty much
what it says in the name. Is
in the name,
Spark 40.
Yeah. You could probably, I think you can crank it a little more than you did, so it's
yeah, maybe.
you have very little loss, but we're going with the 40 watts and say the output is pretty much the input. So yeah, then you have to calculate everything. How long are you playing? How many days are you playing? I've prepared here everything. How long are you playing per day? How many days are you playing per year? How much does your amp consume? And then divide by 1,000 because the prices you're paying for your electricity is usually in kilowatt hours, euro per kilowatt hours or cent per kilowatt hours. Yeah, and this is the formula you're applying then. So we used 1 hour per day, every day practicing, and used the Marshall on full blast all the time, the maximum energy with 175 watts. We've used the Spark for this calculation as well with 1 hour per day, 365 days, and 40 watts,
40 watts. Yeah.
all the time,
So
which you would probably never do at home.
True. So 1 hour, 365 days, and 175 watts or 40 watts
Divided by 1,000.
divided by 1,000
And-
times the price.
Times the price. Yeah, and we've looked up also the prices that we have here in Austria, and also we've calculated it for US prices. And what I've found out is that there are huge differences on where you're living,
Yeah.
what the electricity costs. For example, here in Vorarlberg, in Austria, we pay about 18 to 20 cent per kilowatt hour. The average in Austria, however, is more to 40 cent per kilowatt hour.
Yeah.
The US has also huge differences. Hawaii was the largest one with, I think, 35 cents per kilowatt hour, with below 10 cents. The average, what Google told me, was about 12 cents per kilowatt hour.
Okay.
And we're going with the average. So this means in Austria, when you're going with the average for 0.4 euro per kilowatt hour, you're paying per year, if you play every day 1 hour
With a
the
tube amp.
Marshall full blast, the 50 watt Marshall full blast, 25 euro 55 cent.
It's not that much.
That's actually not that much. In the US, with the average of 12 cent per kilowatt hour, you're actually paying only $7.67 the whole year for cranking the Marshall full blast. Okay, now let's move on to the Spark. Spark takes way less, it's all linear obviously, so if you're having a smaller tube amp, it also quickly goes down a lot.
True.
The Spark uses with the 0.4 euro per kilowatt hour in Austria, €5.84. If you're playing every day 1 hour at full blast. And in the US it's only $1.75.
So with all the assumptions Martin made to demonstrate the calculation, it's obviously the prices would be too high. In reality you would pay much less.
Yeah, we're going here with the absolute extreme you're having. And for a comparison, so you have more of a feeling how much you actually consume with these and how much it costs you. We've also made a comparison with
here it is.
TVs.
TVs.
We've used 55-inch TVs because I think that's what most households around this have, and we've used lists from German Information Center for electricity and consumption. The average usage for a TV in a 55-inch format is between 64 watts and 236 watts.
It's pretty much.
So,
and the maximum consumption would be even higher, ranging from 150 watts to almost 300 watts, 297 to be exact.
Yeah, that's what we've found where there is maximum wattage for the TV. So this means with a tube amp you are somewhere with Class AB amp or even with a Class A amp, because usually they are much smaller. If you're having a Class A amp you're usually at 5-7 watts, something around this. So you're running it at 25 watts input or 30 watts input. You're still half of what, and these are, think about this, these are brand new TVs. They have LED technology. If you're having a plasma TV, you're way ahead of this.
True.
And then let's add, for example, a PS4 to it. You're playing on your PS4 on the TV. The PS4 also takes 150 watts. So you're at about 300 watts when you're playing on the PlayStation usage.
No,
and
on
that's,
average probably.
And that's on average, that's not the maximum we've calculated for the amp. So with this in mind, you're using, when you're playing PS4 on your TV, you're probably using twice the electricity of your tube amp.
A 50 watts tube amp.
A 50 watts tube amp on full crank. If you're just watching TV, you're probably about using the same, so better play guitar than watch TV.
That's a nice conclusion. And to answer my question, or the question I had in the beginning, is it gonna be a luxury hobby? No, definitely not. Even with prices for electricity doubling, it would still be around 50 euros per year and $15. So of course it's not for free, and it's maybe a little bit more expensive with higher electricity prices, but it's not really luxury.
If it gets luxury, watching TV also gets luxury again.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the conclusion you have to draw from this.
Yeah.
And with that, I think we've finished this.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, leave a comment down below. And hope to see you in another video. Bye.
Bye.